Magandang araw sa inyong lahat. So welcome to our subject. And for today, we are about to discuss operating segments. This is your instructor, Noel Bergonia. Okay, just sit back, relax, take down notes, and if you have questions, please let me know. Okay, so let's start. So this particular topic about operating segments is being governed by IFRS number 8. Okay, and the core principle for this standard is to require entity not to disclose information that would help the users of financial statements in evaluating the nature and financial effects of the different types of business activities that our business, of course, is engaged in, okay, and the economic environment in which they operate. Okay, so the scope of this standard is applied to the separate or even individual financial statements of an entity. Okay, also applicable for consolidated financial statements. So remember, in our conceptual framework discussion, when we talk about consolidated financial statements, it refers to financial statements prepared, okay, with the consideration of a parent and subsidiary relationship. Okay, so again, this standard under IFRS number 8, okay, applies for both any individual financial statements or even in consolidated financial statements for those entities or companies that are okay um, equity instruments and debt instruments no are traded in the public market. So if they are traded in the public market or even in the stock exchange, or even the entities that files pa lang no in the process of filing, okay, its consolidated financial statements no with the Securities and Exchange Commissions, okay, for the purpose of issuing any instruments in the public market. So technically, publicly listed entities no yung scope nitong ating IFRS number 8. Okay? So if the company no financial reports contains both financial statements prepared under consolidation or consolidated financial statements, okay, having parent subsidiary relationship, okay, that is within the scope of IFRS, okay, as well as parents separate financial statements, no, yung ating segment information to be discussed na later, to be disclosed also, are required no in the consolidated financial statements only. Okay? So again, no, pag parent and subsidiary relationship yung ating financial statements, or technically it's a consolidated financial statements, and meron din pong separate financial statement, again, the segment information which is related to the operating segments no are required to disclose only on the consolidated financial statements. Okay? So that's the scope of our IFRS number 8. Okay, so right now, let's define what an operating segment is. Okay, so in accordance with the standard, no, the operating segment is a component of an entity, okay, that is engaged in business activities, no, from which they may earn revenues and incur expenses. Okay, so engage sila in business activities. Example, no, let's say you have a business, let's say San Miguel Food Corporation, no, they are engaged in food and beverage. They're engaged in oil or fuel. Okay, they are engaged in packaging. Okay, so those are business activities, no? Separate business activities, okay, that earns revenue as well as incurs expenses. And they are called as operating segment. Okay. Moreover, no, it is a component of an entity whose operating results, okay, are being reviewed regularly by the company's chief operating decision maker. So later we will be defining sino ba tong chief operating decision maker na to. So nire-review daw po yung operations nitong mga segments na to, okay, by the chief operating decision makers in making no decisions about the resources allocation no to the segment, and actually related din dun sa performance ng segment na yon. Okay? So nire-review ng chief operating decision maker. Okay? Lastly, no, an operating segment is a component of an entity for which, okay, discrete information is being available. Okay? So a component of an entity is not excluded now for being an operating segment if the whole purpose no, or the sole purpose of this segment is just to sell product or even services internally, okay, to other components of an enterprise. So meron kasi tayong mga segments po that caters only goods or services only to their co-segments, no, rather than selling their products and services outside of the entity. So ang sabi po dito, no, is not excluded daw. So meaning later, no, once we talk about it, no, if they sold um, outside or sorry inside kasi they are only selling it internally, then they can still be part of our operating segment. Okay? So this operating segment is considered as reportable, okay, if okay um, we meet the criteria, okay? Yung mga criteria na discuss po natin later. Okay, but technically a reportable operating segment, okay, is an operating segment whose segment information is required to be disclosed. So yung sequence ng ating discussion is mamaya no after this, we need to identify sino-sino po yung or ano-ano po yung mga segment natin that are considered as reportable, okay? And then afterwards, no, after identifying ano pong segment yung reportable, then ano po yung mga required disclosures nila. Kasi under IFRS number 8, no, the whole concern of this is the required disclosure related to those reportable segments. Okay? So are we clear on that? Again, if you have questions, please let me know lang po. So right now, let's identify who is the chief operating decision maker na binabanggit po dito sa definition ng operating segment na nagre-review ng financial results ng isang segment. Okay? So a chief operating decision maker in accordance with IFRS number 8, okay, is the person who allocates the resources to these segments. Okay? Also, aside from allocating the resources, okay, to those segments, no, it also assess the performance of those operating segments of our entity. Okay? And lastly, no, this chief operating decision maker is usually the chief executive officer or the CEO or even the chief operating officer or the COO of our company. Okay, so yan po yung technical function niya, no, to allocate resource and to assess the performance of the operating segments. Okay, so yan, siya yung nagre-review totality no, about sa operating segments. Now, no, our operating segments are generally having tinatawag po natin na segment manager, okay, who are directly accountable, okay, in maintaining a regular contact with our chief operating decision maker. So parang kumbaga it's a segment manager, okay? So kung kagaya ng binanggit ko kanina, you have segment A, no, which is related to food and beverage, segment B, which is related to fuel and oil and other segments pa, no? So each of it may have a segment manager who is responsible for again, no, contacting our chief operating decision maker, no, about the operating activities, okay? Also, we have the financial results, no? Some forecasts as well as plans for that particular segment. So in totality, this is talking about management approach, no? Na kung saan there is a segment manager, okay, for each of these segments. Now, the chief operating decision maker may also be the segment manager for some of the operating segments. So ayun pala, no, allowed naman under IFRS number 8 that the chief operating decision maker can also be the segment manager. So parang nangyayari doon, since the segment manager will report to the chief operating decision maker, so parang siya na rin yun, no? Nire-report niya yung result ng particular segment na yon to himself. Okay? And also, a single manager may be the segment manager for more than one operating segment. So pwede pong, kung let's say for example, no, kung titignan natin yung laki ng segment na yon, then most likely baka maliit lang, then baka pwedeng bigyan siya ng two or more na operating segments, okay, to manage. Okay, so again, may mga ang mga taong involved dito are the chief operating decision maker, and even the segment manager. Okay, so are we clear on that? Now, in accordance with IFRS number 8 as well, no? So we can aggregate two or more operating segments into one. Okay, so what are the criteria, no? How we can aggregate, no? Two or more operating segments into one. So pag sinabing aggregate, pagsasamahin. Okay? So a two or more operating segment can be aggregated if it is consistent with the core principle of IFRS number 8. Ano nga ulit yung core principle kanina? Okay, the entity is required to disclose information about the operating segments, okay, which enables the users of the financial statements to evaluate yung nature and financial effects of the types of business activities in which they are engaged. Okay, so yun po, no? Dapat yung aggregation is consistent doon sa providing, information or enabling the users not to evaluate the nature and financial effects of the different types of activities. Moreover, no, the segment natin have similar economic characteristic. And lastly, no, our segment should have similarity with respect to, of course, the nature of products and services. So dapat para ma-aggregate natin, halos parehas dapat yung kanilang products or services, even the nature of the production process nila. Okay, how to make the product or even to deliver the services, even the types or class of customers, no, for their products and services, okay, and also the method, okay, used to distribute the products or services, and lastly, no, if applicable, the nature of regulatory environment. Okay, so again, this is the or these are the criteria, no, so that we can aggregate into a single operating segment, no, two or more operating segments. So kung sakali man na magkaiba na sila ng, let's say for example, um, products or services kagaya nung kanina nabanggit ko po sa inyo yung fuel and oil, no, fuel and oil, ano pa, yung sa may ano to San Miguel fuel and oil, they have food and beverage, okay, ano pa, they have also packaging. Okay, so ito na lang muna, no? They are different kumbaga operations, 'di ba? Different nature of businesses. And this could be separate na mga operating segments natin. Okay, pero mapapansin nyo, no? Let's say for example, fuel and oil. Okay, let's say for example, I'm not sure kung anong content niyan, pero let's say for example, they have gasoline station, no? And then oil refinery. So since they are related to each other and they are similar in the nature of the product, then pwedeng pagsamahin. No? Kung kumbaga kung iisipin natin itong fuel and oil, kung meron man magkahiwalay yan na segment supposed to be, they are just being aggregated into one since they are in a similar economic characteristic. At the same time, the nature of their product, at the same time also the production processes are similar halos, no, and even the food and beverage, of course, no, they are similar in nature. Okay, so ayan po, no, that's how we aggregate two or more operating segments. So right now, let's talk about identifying na po reportable segments. Remember kanina in our definition of the operating segments, I have mentioned that um, an operating segment is considered as reportable, okay, if they meet the criteria, na ito na po yung criteria na i-discuss po natin, okay, and after they meet the criteria, they are required to disclose some information, and later we will be talking about those some information na yun. Okay, so let's start, no, how we could identify that operating segment as reportable. So kung reportable, lalagyan natin siya ng disclosure in accordance with IFRS number 8. Okay? So in IFRS number 8, no, it requires the companies to report financial and descriptive information about the reportable segments. So as mentioned to you a while ago, no, there would be disclosures. So a reportable segment, okay, are operating segments or aggregation of those various segments na kanina po kadi-discuss lang natin about aggregation, okay, um, are considered again as reportable if they meet specified criteria. Okay? Ano po yung mga criteria na yon? So, either Number one, okay, it's reported revenue. Okay, take note of this. Okay, the reported revenue, okay, including both sales to external customers and intersegment sales or transfer. So again, revenue or income are inflow of resources, no, as we have defined in the conceptual framework. And again, no, it may include the sales of external customers. So again, these are customers that are technically outside of the company. And then it also includes, no, yung intersegment sales. At ang intersegment sales naman po is again more on internal transaction of selling from one segment to another segment. So the reported revenue, okay, combined of the external and internal or intersegment, okay, is 10% or more of the combined revenue, internal or external, of all of the operating segments. So dapat, no, para maging reportable po yung segment natin, it meets the criteria na 10% dapat nung particular revenue mo in that segment should be the 10% of, ayun, sorry, 10% of, mali. The revenue of that particular segment should be 10%, no, of the combined revenue. So let's say, for example, this is your um, segment A's revenue. Okay, let's say for example, um, 10 million. Okay, and the total, no? The total revenue is 50 million. Okay, combined revenue na po yun. So ilang percentage po yan? It's actually 20%. So it meets the criteria of this first one na 10% or more of the combined revenue. And thus, that segment is now considered as a reportable segment and is subject to the disclosures required by IFRS number 8. Okay? Are we clear on that? All right, very good. Okay. Next would be, again ha, either of this criteria would be met. So pag na-meet po itong first item na to, no, na 10% or more of the combined revenue, whether internal or external, matik po na reportable segment na siya at required na po siyang mag-disclose. Okay? Clear? Alright. Next in our criteria would be the measure of the profit or loss, no, in its absolute value. Okay, so mamaya may papakita natin yan. So the absolute measure of the reported profit or loss is 10% or more of the greater in absolute amount, okay, of the combined profit of all of the operating segments that did not report a loss and combined reported loss of operating segments that reported a loss. Okay, so ibig sabihin lang, of course, you know naman na absolute, di ba? So disregarding whether profit or loss yon kasi positive and negative yon, di ba? So absolute measure po, okay, 10%. Kagaya kanina, no, 10% criteria po tayo, okay, ng absolute amount, no, whether combined. So kumbaga, halimbawa, you have various segments, okay, and let's say for example, no, merong isa may profit, yung isa may loss, yung isa may profit, yung isa may loss. Okay? So ito pong criteria na to, pangalawang to, okay, pagsasamahin mo yung may mga profit, pagsasamahin mo rin yung may loss. Now, you will look for it as if hindi siya positive or negative or it's absolute, no? Absolute yung pagtingin. So, kung yung combined na yon, no, kung ano po yung mas malaki, let's say for example, 10 million yung combined profit, yung loss naman natin is 5 million lang. So, alin po yung mas malaki doon or of greater value? That would be 10 million, of course. So, the 10% of that 10 million, okay, will be your criteria. So, pag tinignan mo isa-isa yung segment na yon in absolute kumbaga view, no, the 10% of the 10 million, which is magkano yan? 10% of 1 million? Ay nako. 10% of 10 million, no, should be 1 million. Okay? So kung 1 million po yun, then any segment that has either profit o kaya loss, kasi absolute yung tingin natin, di ba? So whether the profit or loss is 1 million or above, then they are already considered as reportable segment. Yun po yung second bullet, no, about the absolute measure of the reported profit or loss. So mamaya we will be discussing specific example, no, para mas maintindihan nyo pa. Okay? So lastly, no, of the specified criteria that if the first and second are not met, no, meron pa tayong pang last, which is dapat yung asset nung segment na yon should be at least 10% or more of the combined assets of all of the operating segments. Okay? So halimbawa po, no, you have segment A, and again, your segment A has a total asset, no, of or identify asset na again, no, 10 million for example. And then yung ating combined total assets ng lahat ng segments, okay, is let's say for example 30 million. So segment A's asset is almost ilan yan? 10 over 30 million. That's actually 33.33. So since more than 10% yung percentage ng asset natin for that segment over the total, then again, that will be considered already as a reportable segment. Okay? So are we clear on that? Alright? So any of these are met. Now, ano mangyari sir kapag hindi po na-meet itong any of this particular criteria? Okay, then most likely that particular segment will not be considered as reportable. Okay? Unless, okay? Kung hindi man niya ma-meet itong criteria ng mga to, okay? Ang sabi po in paragraph number 13 of IFRS number 8, okay? An operating segment that do not meet any quantitative threshold, yun po yun, yung 10% threshold kanina, may be considered as reportable. So pwede pa rin pala, no? Kahit hindi na meet yung 10% criteria, okay? It can be considered still as reportable and separately disclosed if the management believes that information would be useful, okay, to users of financial statements. Okay? So sa standard, there is a 10% rule, no? Yung 10% ng um, reported revenue, okay, 10% of the greater value of the absolute measure of the profit or loss, at saka 10% of the combined asset, no? If any of those are not met, no, then again, merong discretion si management ng company, no, to make it as an operating segment as reportable if it is useful to the users. So ngayon, in our problems, of course, no, it should be specifically indicated, no, that the management, okay, is intending it to be disclosed, no. In reality kasi, no, again, the management's intentions are kumbaga clear, no, clear, kayang identify. Pero sa problem po, no, na sa classroom natin, if ever man na hindi banggitin yan, then ibig sabihin the management does not believe, no, na useful yung information na yun sa user, kaya we will not disclose that if again na it does not meet the quantitative threshold na 10%. Okay? So ayun po ha. So if hindi po na-meet yung criteria na 10%, may chance pa pero dapat si management yung magde-determine. Okay? Then moreover, an entity may combined, no? Kanina aggregation, di ba? An entity may combined information about operating segments that do not meet the criteria natin, okay, in the quantitative threshold na 10%, okay, with the other segments. Okay? If, no, pwede nating i-combine daw if again, they have similar economic characteristics and share majority of the aggregation criteria as we discussed kanina. Okay? Pero pag hindi, then hindi natin sila pwedeng i-aggregate, no? Yung mga hindi po nag-meet doon sa ating quantitative threshold. Okay? So lastly, no, aside from this 10% quantitative threshold, at the same time the management believes na yung information okay are useful, then it would be a reportable segment. Kaya ang sabi po in paragraph number 15, no, supposed to be, okay, kailangan mo rin i-check, no, na dapat kung tapos ka na dun sa quantitative threshold, okay, if the total external revenue, okay, ito po, no? If the total external revenue reported by the operating segments constitutes less than 75% of the entity's revenue, okay? So bali ang titignan lang natin dito, no, aside from the 10% is itong total external revenue. So lahat nung na-identify mo na reportable segment kanina based on the 10% rule, pag inad mo lahat yung total external revenue nila, dapat at least 75% yon ng total entities revenue. Okay? External revenue ha. Total entities external revenue. Now, kapag hindi, then additional operating segments shall be identified, no, so that segments will have, no, combined at least 75% of the entity's revenue, no, included in the reportable segments. Okay? So are we clear on that? So dapat pagsama-samahin natin yon, okay? Para ma-check natin. So hindi tayo titigil dun sa 10% rule natin kanina. No, but rather, we need to check as well the total external revenue po natin. Okay? Are we clear on that? All right. So to explain further yung ating mga criteria, no, in identifying a reportable segment, okay, let us give and discuss this example. Okay. So BT21 company operates in different geographical area since 2019. Okay, the following information pertains to BT21's company now operation in 2020. Okay, so we have various segments. Now, actually, we have five. We have RJ, Tata, Koki, Chimi, and Mang segments. Okay, so these are five different segments, and we have already extracted some of the information that we need, okay, for our identification of the um, criteria for the operating segments, okay, to be reportable. Okay, we have the identifiable assets, the external revenues, the internal revenues, no, the total revenues, which is actually coming from the combination of the external and internal. Then we have the profit and loss, no, of each of the segments. Okay, so here sa baba po, no, we have the total of each of the column, no, for the identifiable assets, external revenues, internal revenues, total natin. So yung profit or loss hindi po tinotal kasi as mentioned sa inyo kanina, no, we're going to check for it, no, based on the absolute measure of combined profit at sa combined loss. Okay, so let's start with our asset test. Okay, remember that in our criteria kanina, okay, we have said that to become a reportable segment, okay, that segment should have at least 10% of the asset, okay, of the entity. Okay, so since the total asset of the entity is 98 million for all of these five segments, okay, the 10% of it is actually 9.8 million. Okay, so kung titignan po natin, that's the minimum 9.8 million. So any higher amount in the 9.8 or even equal to 9.8 are considered already as reportable. Check natin, no? Si RJ po, that is already considered as reportable since na-meet niya po yung asset test natin, okay, which is more than 10% yung kanyang asset over the total company's asset. Also, we have Chimi, no, not 40 million over the 98 million, and also Mang. So, in terms of asset test po natin, tatlo na po sa ating segments, okay, ang considered as reportable. Okay, so they are already required to make the disclosures na i-discuss po natin mamaya. Okay, so that's the first one, no. Another, remember, no, criteria na pwede nating gamitin is yung about total revenue, di ba? So ang sabi kanina, that the revenue of that segment should be at least 10% of the total revenue of the entity. Okay? Or segment revenue. So take note, ito po yung ating ito po yung ating total revenue of the segments, no? So ito po yung titignan natin. So if 172 million po yung totality ng revenues from the segment, okay, and 10% of it, that would be 17.2 million. So any value higher than 17.2, okay, or equal to 17.2 kasi yun yung minimum, okay, should be considered now as reportable. So ano po yun? Si RJ. So in our asset test kanina, si RJ ay reportable na, tapos na-backupan pa ng total revenue. So talagang reportable na si RJ, no? Next would be si Tata. Okay, si Tata po ay 20 million ang total revenue over the 172. So it's higher than 10%. Okay, moreover si Chimi at saka si Mang, no? Sila pong apat yung nakamit doon sa revenue test natin. Okay? So at least 10% or more than 10% actually yung kanilang revenue portion over the total revenue of all of the segments. Okay? So isa na lang po ang hindi reportable segment. We have another criteria. Ano po yung another criteria natin? Yung combined profit. Okay, ano ba yung mga profit natin? Tatlo yan, no? We have the 16 million, 2 million, at saka 22 million. So if you add them all, that would be 40 million for the combined profit or the combined loss. So dalawa lang yung loss natin. We have 6 million at saka 8 million, so 14 million. So take note kanina in our theoretical discussion, no, that for this criteria for the profit or loss, no, it should be in the absolute value. So hindi natin titignan yan whether profit yan or loss. We think of it as it is these are absolute value. Okay, so 40 million for the profit and then for the loss is 14 million. So alin po yung mas mataas dun sa dalawa? Of course, it would be the profit, no? The absolute profit na 40 million. So in that case, no, yung 40 million na yan, okay, times 10%. So in terms of our operating results or the profit or loss checking, yung third criteria natin, okay, 10% which is 4 million. So any value, okay, in the profit or loss, okay, na tumungtong equal to 4 million or more than 4 million, okay, they are already considered as reportable. Okay? So si RJ, kung titignan natin, 16 million siya. So that is already considered as reportable since exceed na po siya doon sa ating 4 million na minimum. Also si Tata, even though it's lost, no, absolute value nga po, the 6 million over the 4 million, it's more than, okay, 10% already. Okay? Moreover, we have Chimi, no? 8 million, and then Simang po 22 million. So again, yung apat na naman po yung nakamit doon sa ating operating result criteria. Okay, so tapos na tayo dun sa 10% quantitative threshold. At kung mapapansin po ninyo, RJ met almost all of the three. Okay, even si Chimi at saka si Mang. Si Tata naman po, dalawa lang yung revenue test at saka yung operating results or profit or loss test natin. Okay, so anyways, ang sabi naman kanina, kahit isa lang po doon sa ating mga criteria yung na-met, okay, then automatically reportable segments na po sila. Okay, so RJ, Tata, Chimi, and Mang are all reportable segments natin who needs to disclose, no, um, the required disclosure that we will be discussing later. Okay. So lastly, guys, di ba ang sabi natin kanina, we need to check whether 75% na ba ng ating external revenue, okay, so yung lahat ng mga reportable segments. So ang kailangan natin is itong total ng external revenue na 132,000. Okay, so pag kinombine ba nating lahat ito, yung mga reportable, 50 million, okay, 16 million, 10 million, at saka 44 million. Okay, is it already almost 75%? Ang sagot po, no, 120 million, lahat po ng external revenues ng reportable. Okay, and then divide it by the 132, it's already 91%. Okay, so ibig sabihin, we exceed already the another threshold which is 75% of the total external revenue of the entity. Kaya ibig sabihin, no, hindi na natin kailangan na idagdag pa si cookie, okay, for uh, the reportable segment. Okay? So again, no, if it exceeds already or equal to the 75% na yon of the external revenue, then enough na po yung mga reportable segments na yon. Okay? Just in case lang na kulang, then saka natin idadagdag si cookie. Pero dito po, again, it's already enough. Okay? Moreover, kanina, di ba, na, kung naalala po ninyo, sinabi sa paragraph number 13 ng IFRS number 8, if the management believes the information is necessary, no, to to be useful for the users, then idadagdag po natin yung mga non-reportable segment based on the quantitative threshold. So dito sa problem na to, hindi naman po nakalagay, no? Kasi we are in the classroom, no? We don't know the intention of the management here in BT company. Wala pong specific na nakalagay. Then, si cookie po talaga ay not a reportable segment already. Okay, so hindi na po siya pwedeng isama. So again, to conclude this now, based on the three criteria, the 10% threshold, okay, na any of them have met either all or even dalawa lang, okay, RJ, Tata, Chimi, and Mang are all the reportable segments, and it would be attested by the total revenues from external revenue na almost 91% na po. Actually, that's 90.9%, no? So, ganun po yun. Okay? So, any questions or clarifications po about how we identify, no, the operating segments? Okay, sige. So, if there is none, okay, then let us proceed, no, with the required disclosures. Kasi after ma-identified yung um, operating segments which are reportable, they are now required to disclose. Okay? So in terms of disclosures, okay, the importance of it is that it enables, of course, the users, no, to evaluate the nature and effect of the business activities. So parang ito rin po yung nasa core principle natin kanina, no, in the operating segment, no, our standard. Now, what are the required disclosures? In accordance with IFRS number 8, no, the required disclosures for the reportable segments are as follows. We have the general information, okay, the information about the reported segment's profit or loss, at saka reconciliation of total of segment revenues, reported segment profit or loss, asset, liabilities, and other material segment items. So iisa-isahin natin to, no? Ano po ba yung mga required disclosures per um, etong mga ito. Okay? So let's start with the general information. Okay? For the general information disclosure, okay, so the company, okay, who have identified the reportable segments, no, should disclose, okay, the following general information related to those reportable segments about number one, okay, the factor or the factors used to identify the entity's reportable segment, okay? Also, yung judgment na ginawa ng management in applying yung aggregation criteria as we have discussed kanina, no? Combining the segments and even um, the types of products and services from which each reportable segments derive its revenues. Okay, so these are the general information that the company needs to disclose about the reportable segment. Okay, to give you example about this, no, tatlo yan, tandaan ninyo. Okay, so I will be using the Globe Telecom Incorporated, no, audited financial statement as of December 31, 2019. Okay, so yung kanilang 2020 is not yet published, so I'm using the most recent, which is 2019 pa lang. Okay, so the first general information kanina, kung naaalala nyo po, is regarding the factors, okay, used to identify the entity's reportable segments. Okay, so kung babasahin nyo ito, this is already the disclosure po, no? Actual disclosure na nasa notes to financial statements nila. Okay, so ito po yung basihan ni Globe. Okay, kasi sabi kanina, di ba, factor use. So ito po, no? The Globe Group present its various operating segments based on the segment net income. So this is already the basis of identifying the entity's reportable segment. So check tayo dun sa unang general information na sinabi natin kanina. Next would be the judgment made by the management in applying aggregation criteria. Okay, so kung titignan po natin, no, are they aggregating it? Okay, una, they do not present geographical information. Moreover, sabi po dito, it does not have any single customers that will meet 10% of the reporting criteria. So in this case, they have different products. Okay, so overall, no, this information would lead, no, that the company or the Globe Telecom, okay, does not apply aggregation criteria. Okay, so 'di ba kanina in our aggregation criteria, they should have similar basis, okay, they have similar nature of products and services and the likes. Okay, so ayan, check na naman tayo dun sa second na um, required disclosure kanina. Okay, and then finally, no, the last one on our general information are the types of products and services, no. So ano ba yung mga types of products and services nila? Again, ang sabi lang dito, no, different product types. Pero actually, mamaya in the succeeding disclosures, no, nandun po yung kanilang types of products and services. Okay, so nakakalat lang kasi in Globe, kung titignan ninyo yung notes to financial statements nila, super haba, no, yung operating segments na yan, information in the notes disclosure, may mga subsections pa po siya. So nandun po yung types of products and services nila. Okay? So check na naman po tayo. Okay, so that's an example of our general information. Okay, any questions or clarifications, please let me know lang po in our chat box. All right, so this is the first required disclosure, no, about general information. Next would be information about the reported segment's profit or loss. Okay, so the entity shall disclose, no, yung following information about the reportable segments, no, um, which are included in the measure of the segment's profit or loss being reviewed by the chief operating decision makers. Okay? So ito po yung mga kailangang i-disclose, yung revenues from external customers, yung transactions between the operating segments, the interest revenue, interest expense, the depreciation expense and amortization, the material items, no, of income and expenses, the entity's interests in the profit or loss is if in just in case no meron tayong associate or joint ventures being accounted for equity method. So you will be discussing that in IAS number 28, okay, in your equity investment discussion, the income tax expense or income, and also some material non-cash items other than depreciation and amortization. So medyo marami-rami po yung required disclosures, no, with regards to the information about the reported segment's profit or loss. Okay, so to show you na ginagawa ito ng mga companies who have identified already the reportable segment, okay, I will be using again Globe Telecommunications, no, Telecom Incorporated's segment information. So as you can see here, no, kanina binanggit ko that the information required to be disclosed are the revenues from external customers. So ito po yun, no, for Globe, no, the data, the voice, the SMS, the broadband. Okay, these are also the nature of services na or types of services na kanina in our first disclosure, which are the general information, no, ay kailangan din po. So magkakasunod actually yan dun sa general info kanina. So yan po yung revenue. So ito po yung amount nun. Actually, dalawa yung segment nila kung mapapansin ninyo, yung mobile communication at saka yung wireline communication services, no? Dalawang segment sila. And then we have also revenues from transaction with other operating segments. So ito po yung intersegment revenue po nila. Okay, yan po yung revenue derived from the transaction with another segment. Okay? So ayan po. And then we have interest revenue. Mayroon ba tayong interest revenue dito? Ayun, may interest income tayo. Okay? Baka nagtataka lang kayo bakit naka-negative yung intersegment revenue kasi you will talk about this in the elimination method, okay, sa consolidation under IFRS number 10, no, sa accounting for business combination. Okay, so it will be an elimination entry kasi intersegment revenue should not be recognized in the consolidated financial statement. Okay, then next would be um, interest expense. So can we find interest expense here? Actually, yes, the financing costs. Okay, then we have depreciation and amortization, ayun, no, after the EBITDA. And then we have material items of income and expenses. So ito po, no, you have the impairment losses, the cost of inventory sold, operating expenses. So ayan, at least meron silang disclosure about that. And then entities interest in the associates or joint venture. So ito po yun, equity in net losses of associate and joint ventures. Then income tax expense or income. So ito po yun, provision for income tax. And then material non-cash items other than depreciation. I think wala naman ng iba. Ay ito no, addition in the property, plant and equipment at saka impairment loss. So I just want to show you no that the required disclosure as per the standard are being followed by those entities, especially Globe, no, that is actually publicly listed. If kanina naalala ninyo in the introduction that this standard is being applied especially for those entities that are um, in the public market, no, for the equity as well as their debt instruments. Okay, so ayan po. So these are the required disclosures as to the information about reported segments, profit or loss. Okay, so any questions po or clarifications, again, please let me know. Okay, so the last set of required disclosure are about the reconciliation. Sir, magbabank recon ba ako dito? Not necessary, okay? Kasi when we talk about reconciliation, no, it's just simply matching no, what you have reported in the financial statements and the details that you have. Okay, so let's try to look what are the reconciliations na kailangan pong i-provide ng entity. So we have the total reportable segments revenue to the entity's revenue. Okay. We have also the total reportable segments profit or loss, no? Compare it with the entity's profit or loss before taxes and expenses and discontinued operations. By the way, mamaya for Globe, no, wala akong nakitang discontinued operations. So, wala po yan. No? Pero itong measure of profit or loss over the entity, meron po yan. Okay? Then we have reportable segments, entities asset versus the entity's asset. No? We have also the liabilities at saka yung amount of every material item. So parang we are just comparing no whatever we have the data about the reportable segments and the reported value in our entity's financial statement. Okay? So let's try to look no yung mga sample reconciliation of Globe Telecom. Okay? So ito po naka-indicate na um, here is the reconciliation no, of the information about the EBITDA. Okay, that's earning before um, interests. Oh, sorry, earnings before interest and taxes. Okay, so um, versus the income before tax presented in the consolidated financial statement po natin. Okay, so ito po no, as you can see here in the totality, okay, we have nire-reconcile natin, no? Kung titignan nyo po, sabi po dito sa reconciliation, the income before tax in 2019 ha, kasi comparative po itong FS. Itong nandito sa other side, 2019 lang. Okay, so let's just try to look into 2019. Okay, so ito yung mga items, no? Reconciling items niya, okay, na present niya. Okay, here are 32,827,376 for the income before income taxes. Okay, and then as you can see here, the income, okay, before taxes, okay, is 32,827,000 din po. Okay, 376. So, matchy-matchy po sila. Okay? Are we clear on that? So, kinompare po yung income before tax natin, okay, in the consolidated financial statement or what is being reported since this is consolidated FS, may parent and subsidiary relationship sila, and the value in the reconciled notes po natin. Okay? So, yan, nasa notes lang naman yan. Okay, are we clear on that? All right. Another is yung sa net income after tax. Okay, so ito po no, yung 22,283,757, okay? Ito rin po yung nandito sa net income or loss ng consolidated financial statement for 2019. Okay? So are we clear on that? So ayan ha, there would be matching lang ng mga amount. So kumbaga detailed disclosure or detailed information about the comparison of the consolidated and the information of our segments, no? Okay? And then lastly, no, medyo magja-jump lang ako to another company kasi I haven't seen yung total assets, no? Hindi ko lang siguro nakita, pero I have seen it in the PLDT naman, no? Similar ano rin, similar industry company. Okay, so eto naman for PLDT, okay, we have wireless, fixed line, others, no, and the consolidated. Okay, so ang gusto ko lang i-present dito is about the reconciliation of the segment's asset to the entity's asset. Okay, so ito po 'yon. Okay, reconciliation niya. Okay, and ayan, over the total assets and liabilities. Tapos yung last na bullet kanina in the theory discussion is all about the other segment amounts, no? So ito po, no, other segment information, okay, that they have presented as well in the notes. Okay? So technically yung mga details niyan, no, kung saan manggagaling yan would also be discussed to you in the individual um, discussions nyo naman, no, over the other accounting subjects. Okay? So any questions or clarifications po? All right. So that's the three required disclosures, no, as per IFRS number 8, okay, about the reportable segments. Okay? So, konti na lang po, no? Another thing that the standard also discuss aside from identifying the reportable segment at saka yung mga required disclosures are related to the restatement of previously reported information. Okay, so just in case lang, no, na nagkaroon po ng changes in the structure yung ating company, okay, which distorts the um, reportable segment natin na identified kanina, ang sabi lang naman po, no, that the corresponding information for earlier periods, including the interim periods, okay, so interim reporting is na-discuss natin previously, okay, shall be restated unless the information is available and the cost to develop it would be excessive. Okay, so just like the other discussion about restatement natin, okay, ganun po yung gagawin natin, no, with regards to the reportable segments po natin. Okay, so if ever that there is a change in structure po natin with regards to those segments. Okay, so ayun po, details of that siguro ngayon hindi ako makapag-discuss kasi I haven't seen yet a financial statement, no, that actually change in the structure, okay, to be compared. Okay, pero I think you can experience that in the future kapag kayo po ay nasa practice na. Okay, and then finally, okay, we have the entity-wide disclosures. Okay, so aside from the specific disclosures of the reportable segments, ngayon naman po we have the entity-wide disclosures, no? So meron lang pong mga items discussed under FRS number 8, no, that we need to disclose, no, in the entity perspective rather than segment, okay, such as yung products or services, geographical area at saka major customers. Okay, so let's see kung ano po yung examples nitong entity-wide disclosure na to na not related naman dun sa specific lang na segment. Okay, so products or services, no? So ito po yung sa Globe kanina, sa Globe Telecom. So kung kanina, sabi po they have different products. So ito po yung different products nila, yung mobile communication at saka yung wireline communication services. So that's one of the entity-wide disclosure, no? Information about the products or services. So ayan po yung mga explanation by Globe nung kanilang mga services offered. Next would be geographical areas. So dito po sa connection din ito, 34.2.4. Actually, this is under the disclosure of operating segment, no? So with regards to geographical area, it is local, national, and international long distance daw. Okay? for their clients in the Philippines. Okay, so technically their products are all here in the Philippines. No, yun po yung geographical area nila. So that's the next entity-wide disclosure that they do have. And then lastly, no, we have the major customers. Okay, so as you can see in the last part of the um, operating segment disclosures po nila, binanggit po dito yung kanilang mga customers, okay, which are of course yung sa group postpaid voice services provides basic landline services, okay, to other Globe landline subscribers. So yung mga landline subscribers nila, and then they have also corporate or SME clients. Okay? So, ayan, they have various subscribers. Baka kayo, no, you are Globe users, then you are part of their clients. Okay? Whether corporate, okay, yung company usage, or even specific customers yung kinikater nilang services. Okay? So, yan po yung mga tatlong entity-wide disclosures na gusto ko ipakita sa inyo that they are in accordance with IFRS number 8. Okay? So I hope that you have learned something about our discussion for today. So to summarize, no, we have discussed about operating segments, which are segments that um, are engaged in the business activities, no, whose operating results are being reviewed, as well as the discrete information are available. And then we have discussed that the chief operating decision maker is the person who allocates resources, okay, assess the performance, and he could be or she could be the chief executive officer or chief operating officer. And then we have discussed the criteria, no? Tatlong criteria for quantitative threshold, no? And either of them could be kumbaga met in order for a segment to become reportable, no, 10% of the total asset, 10% of the absolute amount of the profit or loss, whichever is higher, and even 10% of the combined total revenue. And take note na kapag na-meet na po or na-identify na natin yung mga reportable segment, then we need to check final yung 75%, okay, ng total external revenue. And then we have discussed um, the required disclosures na categorized under the general information, information about the segment's profit or loss, at saka yung mga reconciliation ng mga information, no, corresponding to entities amount. Okay, and lastly, we have discussed yung entity-wide disclosures, tatlo po yun, that the entity needs to disclose about their product services, geographical areas, and major customers. Okay, so that's it for our discussion of our operating segment. Now, if you do have questions, please let me know lang po sa ating respective chat boxes. Okay, so we will discuss more about this, no, as we use our sample exercises, no, in our synchronous sessions. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. Okay, and have a great day. Kamsahamnida. Bye-bye and sayonara.